joining us today. And very congratulations on securing All India Rank 139 in CLAT PG 2022 examination. Welcome. So will you please inform our readers a little bit about yourself and your educational background?
I'm Gayathri. I'm from Hyderabad. I did my BBA LLB honors from ICFI Law School, Hyderabad itself. I did write CLAT before for my LLB, but I couldn't crack it. So I did in a private college. It was a great experience, and I did my specialization in business laws and cyber laws. So I wanted to continue and further educate myself in the same area of commercial laws and business laws. So LLM was my preference.
Okay, thank you for that. So now coming to CLAT PG paper. So what was your first reaction on seeing the paper, and what did you think about the difficulty level? So did you think that the paper was a little different from last 2 years pattern? What was your reaction on that?
Absolutely. I think the first time, so what I am used to doing is every single time a question paper comes to me, I read the entire paper, at least glance through it so that I'm not taken aback when I see a question. But when I glanced through the entire paper, I was definitely surprised that the most important topics that I thought would definitely come, at least a single question, like reservation, marital rape, sedition, so many others, administrative law, the questions, environmental law, though the questions came, but the questions were a little different. So I was definitely taken aback. I was very surprised that it was, different from what I expected. So for me, it was very, very difficult initially. It was very difficult for me to focus and put my mind to the question paper because I found 2020 and 2021 paper a little easier, on the easier side of it. But this paper for me was extremely difficult.
Okay. So, yeah, you're absolutely right that the pattern is evolving, so to speak, because there is no consistency per se in terms of what they will be asking, whether it will be a focus on landmark cases or recent cases or concepts, right? So, okay, so you found the paper to be a little surprising, if not difficult, right? Yeah. Okay, so now coming to the weightage of constitutional law, or let's say jurisprudence in the paper, what do you think that this year paper, what kind of weightage did these important subjects had?
For me, I think jurisprudence was not a very important subject. So I always put it on the second tier. For me, constitutional, criminal, family law, all of these were subjects that would definitely be asked. So constitution was, I always gave it importance because I thought it will be, asked for more than 30 marks, 30, 40 marks.
Yeah.
This time, yes, it was a little less. But I think it was around that area only. But jurisprudence, there were 2 passages that came from jurisprudence directly. And I wasn't very prepared with jurisprudence. For me, it was my weak point. That was again another surprise. But for constitutional law, I think I was satisfied with the number of questions that were asked.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So, okay, so constitutional law you were confident in, and jurisprudence, I think they have always been testing jurisprudence even before the pattern changed, right? However, the kind of questions that they asked has drastically changed, of course. Okay, now coming to criminal law. So most candidates do not study CRPC or evidence law in as much detail as they study IPC. So how did you deal with those procedural areas in CLAT PG's paper?
Looking at the past year's paper and the number of questions from CRPC that came, I was very sure CRPC and evidence, if not equal, but at least not very less importance than IPC. Even if questions from IPC are directly asked, there will be some questions about CRPC and how they are related to each other. I think in my paper, I did not really see questions directly from IPC per se, but CRPC questions came, Gautam Navlakha case came. So for me, it was always about giving equal importance to all the procedural laws. Initially, when I started, I did give a little importance to civil procedure code also, because I thought if they surprise us last time giving CRPC, maybe they'll just bombard CPC on us. So I did study that also a little. So for me, procedural laws were as equally important as substantive laws.
Right. So basically, with the changing pattern, you really cannot argue that procedural laws are less important than the substantive ones, right? Yeah. Okay. So okay. So this is the part that you were expecting. Now, some areas, for example, in family law, nobody would have expected Family Courts Act to be asked, or for that matter, Juvenile Justice Act to be asked. So, were you able to solve those questions, and how did you feel about that?
No. So initially, again, no, I couldn't solve those questions. But I think we're really lucky. The advantageous part or the pro side of having this kind of a paper is that there are clues within the passage. So if we are focused and if we are calm, we can actually find some kind of clues that can lead us to answers, if not direct answers being present in the passage. So I did not study, obviously, Juvenile Justice Act or Family Courts Act, but I read the passage and I was just trying to draw inferences and conclusions from the passage itself and trying to answer the questions. There were some questions that I knew from my UG, the answers that I knew from my UG. I was confused between two options and I took my chance there.
Right, right. Okay, so even though these areas were tested, the answers were in the passage itself, or like some of the answers.
Right.
So now coming to time management, because with CLAT as well as IELT, the problem now is that they have a different pattern which requires you to be very good at your reading speed, or being able to answer everything in a very short span of time. So did you face any time management difficulty in answering this year's paper?
CLAT, no, not really. Because so of course, I was again surprised by the number of passages that were asked. Because everything that I studied with the mind that probably there'll be 12 passages, 10 questions each. But given that there were 20 passages, I was again a little surprised. But I think for me, passage reading honestly was not a very difficult task to do. Because I remember you, Sudipta sir, everybody, in fact, of Jurisedge faculty, they kept asking us to read judgments when we started judgments. So, and judgments are at least 20-30 pages long judgments in order to separate facts and separate unimportant stuff with important stuff. So with that, I think I got my practice of reading. And since there is so much boring and there's just one cliched paragraph, to keep that focus and to be attentive was very important for me. So for me, passage reading was not very difficult. For CLAT, I could solve it within the time. I had 5 minutes left to go back and check my answers, and if there are the questions that I left, if I wanted to do that. So CLAT was not a problem. ALET was very, very difficult for me. I knew two answers, subjective answers, but I also knew that subjective won't really count if I don't do well in my MCQs. So part A, I started doing. English was okay, but legal, the passages were so long. For me, I think that was the problem. I couldn't attempt one question subjective and this passages, some questions. So for me, CLAT was okay, but ALET was extremely difficult.
Right. So also because in CLAT, I think everybody is now expecting that they'll either be like 12 passages or 20 passages, because they have tested both the patterns, right? But IELT very recently, I mean, this year only they changed the pattern. So it was actually very lengthy to solve. But I guess it was lengthy for everybody, so it won't really matter as much. Let's hope to that. But yeah, okay. So your understanding is that if somebody is preparing for CLAT and if they're already reading judgments, then time management should ideally not be an issue, at least in CLAT
Yes.
exam. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now coming to your preparation. So how long did you prepare for CLAT PG, and what was your strategy for covering the whole syllabus, because it has more than 15, 16 subjects in the syllabus itself. So how did you go about it?
I honestly thought of attempting CLAT PG in the last June, July. So it was not a very long process, or I wasn't very determined. I joined Jurisedge in October or September for coaching and for help. But my actual preparation started from January. I wasn't focused the last entire year. I had my exams going on. I had internships that I was doing. So for me, this always took a back seat. It was from January that I was extremely focused on. And the strategy was pretty simple. One, I needed direction. I needed a structure to move around, to navigate. And I think Jurisedge gave me that structure. They just feeded me that, these are the subjects and this is the way to move around. So it was easier for me to begin, to start with. Uh, there were few subjects that I knew I was very poor at. And for me, those took priority over the subjects that I knew I could do, even if I did not really revise them even once. Subjects like tort and contracts, I was confident at. Company law, I was confident at. So for me, it was about doing family law, CRPC, IPC, constitution. All of these subjects took priority because administrative law. One was I did not really study them well in my UG, and two was they obviously take more importance in the paper than torts or contracts or any other subject. So for me, it was about putting my weakness and what is important on the paper at the first pedestal, and then the rest of the things will. I thought I'd do them if I have time, and I did not do them because I did not have time. So
Right. Okay, so basically you focused on the areas that were not very strong for you and you went ahead with that. Okay, this is with respect to some major subjects. Now, there are some areas in the syllabus itself which many candidates don't really pay much attention to. For example, taxation law. Or let's say even company law, like you were confident with that, but many people don't really know where to begin with a subject as vast as company law, right? So how did you prepare for them? Like, did you prepare for taxation or labor law or property act? And if yes, then how did you go about it?
I did not specifically sit with those subjects. What I did was I looked at the recent judgments that were there, like Mohit Minerals case came about, and there were a couple of cases. There was one case on amalgamation of company and taxation as well. There was one case about that. So whenever I found cases from other subjects that were not from major subjects, I did a little research on those topics, like arbitration and conciliation. There came a few cases. Consumer protection, a few cases came about. These I did not really read the entire Bare Act, or I did not read them as a subject per se, but I read them as per what the judgment asked of me or the judgment demanded. So labor law, again, I did not really see labor law check because it's really vast, and it's not something that you can finish it in a day or two. So there is a selective reading that goes on about there also, but we have to be smart and we have to take our chances with respect to what might come and what may not. So if there is a judgment particularly about a subject, I don't think we should, we can afford to leave that at least that topic in that subject. So for me, taxation and company, I covered it like that as per the judgments.
Right. That makes sense also because in a competitive exam, you cannot possibly read everything. And I think that is a strategy that, most toppers go about, that they selectively and smartly go about the areas which are like extremely vast. Right. Okay. So this is with respect to the covering of the subjects. Now coming to emphasis on basic concepts and recent judgments, because CLAT website clearly says that they want to test your recent knowledge of legal events and recent cases. So what do you think should be one's priority while preparing for this particular examination? Should they be focusing on recent cases or basics, or should it be like a combination of both of them?
I've heard a lot of people say combination, but I would go a step further and say, no, I think basics are very important. Because I think even you've been telling us from the beginning that basics are extremely important. And I think it also makes a lot of sense logically if we see if there is a question that comes from, or what is this judgment or what is the quorum, there'll be a couple of questions that you may not be able to answer, but the rest of the questions will be from the basics only. So it is a good chance that you are taking that there are 3 questions that you can answer, and there are 2 or 1 question that you may not be able to answer. I think that was again the good odds for me. And so for me, it was very important that I do my basics first. Also, if I read judgments and not read my basics or cover my basics, I wouldn't really be able to understand what the judgment is saying. Because there are so many sections, so many articles, so many references that are made. There are so many case laws that are referred in the judgment itself. It becomes very difficult again to navigate and maneuver through what judgments are landmark, what judgments are not landmark, and all of that. That knowledge will come only if we read our basics first. So for me, again, I concentrated on my basics. And I think it was in the last 2 or 3 days that I actually sat and I wrote judgments down and I by-hearted them. Before that, I wasn't really keen on judgments.
Right. Makes sense. Like with this paper, if you see that even if they have asked recent cases, the questions are still from the concepts, like irrespective of whether you have read the whole judgment or not. Like if you are fairly aware of what is happening around you and the judgments, if you just have like a good overview of that, then you will be able to attempt questions at least. Right. That makes sense. Okay. So now coming to our last question, what advice would you give to future CLAT PG aspirants and how should they prepare for this exam? And also tips for handling changes in the pattern or in the syllabus, because that constantly keeps happening, be it IELTS or be it CLAT. So what would your advice be?
Advice with respect to CLAT, I think irrespective of when you are starting, a year before, 2 years before, or 6 months, or even a month before, you can crack it without any doubt. There are 2 things that you should keep in mind. One, don't let pressure get to your head of the time that is there. And 2, concentrate on subjects that you are weak. Because we've all honestly done all of these subjects in our UG, but we may remember or we may not remember some stuff, or we're not very clear with some topics. So always concentrate on things that you're weak and just solve them and put them aside. Once you're done with that, and if you have a lot of time left, then you can do with subjects that you're confident and revise and refresh. 2, I think this you told me and told all of us, but I did not really listen to you. One was, the advice was that never, ever, ever start a new topic exactly the day before the exam, or do anything, in fact, the day before the exam. I remember in the last session we had, you told us just to chill and not really focus on the exam much. I did not listen. I did the exact opposite of it. I started new topics. I was reading 2020, 2021 judgments. I was reading 2019 judgments. I was making notes. I remember I slept at 12 o'clock at night, woke up at 4 o'clock, and the entire day of 19 June, my head was aching. I couldn't concentrate. I was so nervous. I was writing wrong things on the question paper and the OMR when I was filling. I did a lot of mistakes there. So I think the second will be, it is a very cliched advice, but it is such an important advice. We don't tend to take it seriously, but we should never, ever put ourselves under tremendous pressure at least a day before. Something that I learned the hard way, because my head was just bombarded with so much information. It was just overflowing and I couldn't concentrate. So that is another. Tips with respect to changing pattern, I think, yes, it is a little difficult to practice when the pattern changes. But I think the pattern changes for our good, right? At least the pattern that is there now for CLAT and ALIT. Though it is a little lengthy and time management is something that we should practice upon. But with passages, the advantage is the answers are there in the passage itself. There are clues in the passage itself. So only if we can just learn how to manage our time around the questions, I think it is on the easier side. Subject-wise, again, I think you'll have to take a little chance. It depends a lot on your luck as well. But there's some chance that you'll have to take. There have to be some subjects that you should leave. But you should be aware about what those subjects deal with, at least to answer a single question if it comes from that subject. But otherwise, I think it is for the benefit of the students that the pattern has changed.
Right. That is very true. And with this, they are able to test your knowledge of recent events and what is happening in judgments. So I think that knowledge anyway helps you further down the road. And you are absolutely right that in competitive exam, it is mostly a game of how calm and composed you are and whether you're able to perform on that day or not. Because you may have read a lot and you may have prepared very well, but if you are not prepared on that day particularly, then of course, you will be facing problems. But I'm glad that you were able to get such a good rank. And so what are your future plans? Where do you want to study, NLS or NALSAR, and what do you want to do after that?
I want to definitely go to NLS, Bangalore. But I think my chances are very bleak. I'm just hoping for vacancies to be there. I'm just hoping for vacancies to be there. I live in Hyderabad, so Nalsar is another good option. For me, after my LLM, I definitely want to pursue PhD and go to the academic side. And if I'm not pursuing my PhD right after it, at least I want to work at a big law firm, at top tier law firms for a while. And then probably pursue my PhD from an Ivy League. That's what I aim for. So hopefully I get to do that.
Definitely. And I'm sure that you'll be able to get through NLS also. If not, NALSAR is also an excellent college to pursue specialization in business laws. So thank you so much, Gayathri, for joining us
today. You, ma'am. Thank
you. Good luck for all your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.